It's the Dev Friday Show with Mark and Tim.
Alrighty, it is the Dev Friday Show. It is with Mark and Tim. I feel like there's something else I should say here, but I honestly, I didn't even have enough time to think about it. I got up early today, Mark. I had to run some errands before the show, get some super glue, because I found out that super glue that came when my grandparents moved in with us. That's got to be, 7 years ago now? Super glue that came from their house in Arkansas, which I have no idea how long it was out there. And then it's not as effective as it probably could have been. So I had to run out and get some super glue, the gel kind. Have you used the gel super glue?
Okay, this is something that I did not anticipate you talking about in any way, shape, or form.
No, you were thinking we were going with that. So because I needed some. I love the gel stuff because it doesn't run all the way. And what I'm doing, I'm making cards. So there's some. I'm laser cutting some card stock, and I'm gluing together some cards. And the super glue is great for that. But the gel super glue doesn't run. It doesn't absorb in the paper as fast. So it's definitely the right product for my current needs. So I was doing that this morning. Got back, got the show kind of put together last week so we can push it. Was doing some other stuff, and just lost track of time. That's why we were a minute late.
I bet this is what every developer is hoping to hear about.
I know, right? They were like,
when they log into our live stream or download one of our episodes, and they want to hear about super glue.
Yeah, they're like, I'm looking for a couple minutes of some good riveting super glue talk, and I really think I'm going to get it from Dev Friday this week. What I found interesting is I've been setting the title for the next episode at the end of whatever episode we do,
because we're trying to plan ahead.
It's something like that.
We're trying to prepare in any way that we can.
I feel like every week we realize at the end of the show, it's like, oh, we would have talked about this if we had time. So that's just what I put up there. I have to admit, I get the 10X thing because you're in your summer journey to become a 10X developer.
That's right.
But I don't remember what the bottleneck was. Is it the bottleneck to becoming a 10X developer, or you weren't sure of like what is? Oh, that's right. You were asking what is the bottleneck or something like that. Like, what do we find in whether it's in performance or something like that? I don't know. There was some question at the end of the last show. It may have even been after the show ended.
Maybe the question should be, what is the bottleneck for our show actually being successful?
I don't know. Us. It's probably us. Because I feel like there's other podcasts out there and they are successful and they don't have us.
That's true.
So that could be, but we're doing. Are you keeping track of the stats in Australia? Are we still?
No, like I said, I cannot keep. I am not going to go down that road of being obsessed with the numbers, the stats, because I'm the type of.
You're not even going to start down the road.
I'm the type of person that once I start to look at the numbers, I'm going to get fixated on them, and then I'm going to start to actually want to prepare for the show, and it's just going to go sideways.
The worst. But you are I think it's your iTunes account, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. And I haven't checked it in forever. All I know is that it's still being pushed when we update the RSS feed. The show is getting updated on iTunes, on Spotify, and I do check it there occasionally just to kind of make sure that everything's getting updated. And
then it's there. Okay. Yeah.
It's work. It's RSS, Tim. It just works, right?
It's just, yeah. Oh boy, we could talk about that too.
It's like hypermedia. It just works.
It's like hypermedia. It just works. I like that. I don't think that is exactly what the output of last week's show was, but a decent summary. But since you brought up RSS, I am going to give what I think everybody is interested in this show. It's pretty much uninformed opinions of two developers that have just kind of read something and think that they understand how it works.
That sounds like a show.
I know, right? Right. That's this show. So you're on the Blue Sky thingy, right?
Ooh, I'm skeeting, Tim. I'm skeeting.
Give me a break. So you're on the Blue Sky thing.
I was thinking about this too. If the skeeting is the new tweeting, in the Blue Sky, does that mean we're all bringing shotguns to the Blue Sky and just skeeting away and shooting at the
it's just a duck hunt.
Flying skeets.
It's just a duck hunt all over again. So anyway, did you see Jack's post about someone was like, hey, something like, do you think Oh, I forget what the question exactly was, but saying, do you think this is going to be around? Blue Sky will be around for a long time. In some of that context, and Jack's response was, "I hope not." This is like a reference app for the protocol, and so this is where I'm saying I'm getting into the uninformed. I haven't dug deeply into any of these two things I'm going to talk about. Just at a surface level, the gut feeling I get from the app protocol versus, say, like the federation that Mastodon allows, right? Then there's the Fediverse, and I've not dug into that either. I feel like, and I may be wrong, and if I'm wrong, then at least take this as my thought as to what would work versus maybe what isn't working. But I feel like a lot of what we have in terms of existing federation is very much server oriented. My server is going to connect to your server, so we are federated, so users from my server can communicate with users from your server. But if for some reason I'm like, don't like those users over there, as a server admin, I can cut the federation, right? I can say, no, you're not part of, I think it's very server oriented. If my very surface reading of the app protocol, and the thing that kind of excites me, if I understand it correctly, is I feel like the way they're working is very much user federation, where as long as the account is out there and supports the protocol at wherever, you can, through your client and your list of people that you are following, or whatever the terminology is, you can go out, find their server. It has the app protocol, so you can pull in their feed and you can see everything. So it's user federation, not necessarily server federation. And to me, that feels very much like, again, I know I've made this comparison before. It feels very much like RSS. It feels very much like you are free to publish what you want to publish. And if people want to follow you, great. And you don't have to worry about, well, which network am I on, which is great too. Because back in the blogging RSS days, right? You could open up a site on WordPress.com. You could host it there, but you could also spin up your own WordPress server, right? Or you could publish your own blog by hand with RSS, and a person who wanted to get your content could just add you to their, what was it, OPLM? Was that the thing? The file that had all your RSS feeds that you would subscribe to. I think it was like I forget what OPLM stands for.
That was related to the podcasting.
They both use RSS.
Yeah. Okay.
It's both using RSS behind the scenes, right? So you'd say, yeah, here's all the content I want to follow. Just go out and get it from all. It doesn't matter if these two servers don't like each other. They're all just supporting the same protocol, the same format. And I feel like that's the direction the app protocol is going. I hope that's the direction the app protocol is going, because I think that's a much better way. I don't, if I can spin up my own personal at protocol micro blogging thingy, I think I might do that. I don't want to support other users, but if it's just a way for me to self-publish what I want to publish, and then you can pull it in through your client, because you can say, follow Tim. Hey, it's his domain, right? Like, you're going to go there, and from the domain, you're going to figure out, well, where do I go to get his feed? How do I interact? And but I'm not sure though, because part of what I've seen in the app protocol is a bit of a server to server federation type thing, and some crawling for analytics and stuff like that. So I'm not quite sure where on the spectrum it falls, but I am very much on the federation, personal federator, basically a follower list. And leave the servers out of it. Stop having servers have to communicate with each other. That to me seems to be the big issue with other attempts to federate. Is one server says, hey, we don't like them, cut them off. Now all the users there are basically orphaned, and they're like, well, now I have to either find a way to migrate. Oh, yeah, you can do it. You can do it. Is it easy to do it? I don't believe so. But anyway, nobody asked that opinion, but I gave it, and I feel like that is exactly what the internet is for. So there you go.
And once again, we had to start thinking about things that we disagree with, because I totally agree with you on this point. That I think giving power back to the user when it comes to their social network is definitely the future. And while we were talking, I was thinking about, because you made a good reference at the beginning, that Jack doesn't look at this as, or the app, the Blue Sky.
Yeah.
What's the domain for that? Blue Sky. Social.
I think it's bsky.app. Okay. I think.
But they're not intending that to take over Twitter. It's not going to be
That's
like
not
the
Jack's
next,
intent. The
the next
user
app.
base, however, seems to be a different
That's
perspective.
Which it is interesting. Once you gave me the invite and getting into it, it did actually feel like the old Twitter. And we
Oh,
talked
like
about
everybody
this,
just talking around everybody, and yeah.
just talk about random things, posting a lot of memes, but it was also like very freeform, very fun. Also, if you wanted to, it seems like, because I think there is one stream you could take in the fire hose, or the whole. I don't know
I
how
thought it was just
accurate it is, but
I-
it is kind of interesting because it kind of brought back some of that old kind of original
remember when
Twitter.
you could just
Yeah,
see
when you
the
could
fire
see
hose,
that.
yeah, which you cannot anymore. That's for sure.
So, and it kind of feels like, yeah, it's a little bit of a wild west. And I think, yeah, people are trying to leave Twitter, get onto this platform and trying to, let's make it back into the Twitter where Twitter was a couple years ago. And I'm like, I don't.
And that's the thing. I don't want Twitter the way it was
Yeah.
a couple. I don't want. I want to go back to the early days of the web where people said, "I'm going to publish what I want to publish, and I'm not going to expect a platform to either take me on or require one."
Yeah.
So,
and I was thinking about it. Well, so Jack's intention is not to make Blue Sky, the app, become the leading social networking app and kind of take traffic away from Twitter, but they wanted to evolve into a protocol or let's say an open platform that other servers or other applications can support and integrate with. Then what is he just doing it from an altruistic standpoint? Like he's just trying to make this open platform that everybody can use, and what's his end goal for it?
I don't know. I'll ask him next time I sit down
Please
and have a conversation.
Maybe we should have him on the show.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. You just shoot him a message. See if he'll join us for a little sit down discussion. I don't know what his motivation is. I actually think some of it is that. I think some of it is seeing Twitter grow and being like, brought this into the world and went a different direction than I actually wanted it to go. Like I think if I understand what he has said or posted, I feel like his thought is one day Twitter could support the @ protocol. And then wherever you want your content to be, if you don't want a Twitter account, great. If you want to follow somebody on Twitter with whatever your @ client is, you can just say, yeah, I'll follow that person and I'll see everything. And I may be able to reply as long as Twitter knows how to pull my replies into their stream. And it is that type of federation where it's like, yep, if I'm replying, how do they know? And that's complex and I don't know. But I feel like the more we move, like I said, back to it's not platforms communicating or nodes or instances communicating. It is very much users just picking who they want to communicate. And here's the URL where you find that data. Back to that old RSS model, I think is a better way, not because, well, just because it doesn't make us so dependent on these platforms.
Well, my favorite feature of that is the domain name.
Oh, the fact that you could just register
that was one of the first things I was curious about, how they're promoting the identity as love. If you want to tie your identity back to a domain name, this protocol gives you that ability. And it was super easy to do. Well, I would say it's easy to do for somebody who's used to managing domain names or managing DNS records and to be able to configure that. But I think that if you could, if you have the ability to buy your own domain name and to do a little bit of configuration on it, just setting up a text record on that domain name, just so you can identify that domain with your actual Blue Sky account and be able to make that connection, and then have that domain name basically be your identity on the platform or on the protocol. I think that's great. Like, and then you could take, like we talked about, you could take that from one place to the next. It's not tied to one platform. It's tied to your own domain.
If I understand the way that works, it's the text record that then points you back to the concrete server. So it's not like you don't have to host it yourself. And if you've ever bought a domain and like configured it for MailChimp or SendGrid or whatever mail, you've done this, right? Or configured Gmail to send, whatever Google calls their apps anymore, configured that to work with your domain. You've done exactly this work.
That's a much better way than doing a blue check mark.
We can talk about that now. We can talk about the blue check mark.
But I was also thinking about social media because I'm trying to get back on the social web, Tim. You know me, I've always kind of tried to keep my privacy close to myself. Try to be, try to not be too open about, professional things, or I don't know. I've just the past few years as been teaching, just been pushing back against the social media, but I'm trying to get back more into it to try to try to develop my social profile and try to get my name out there, because I think that's going to be part of the process that I'm going to have to kind of work on.
This is, and
this
you
summer.
have, I don't know if we talked about this last show. I think it may have been in the post show. You have a plan.
I do. And I'm not going to, like I said, maybe after you get back from this conference, which we will not name right now, even though I know its name will come up at some point in the show.
You think it'll come up at some point in the show, the conference that I'm going to? Okay.
Maybe after the conference, we can spend a little bit more time on my overall plan for the summer. But just thinking about the social networks and getting back onto them, like I said, I've kind of stayed away from Facebook. I always looked at Twitter, just kind of a fun kind of, I just like to joke and just make memes and just kind of like, just kind of have fun and just kind of treat it as like a thing just to kind of occasionally do once a day, just kind of see what people are talking about and just make, and make fun of people or just make jokes. If you go to my Twitter feed, that's pretty much all it is.
That's pretty much it. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't take it seriously, but I just think, I think that's honestly, that's why Twitter's fun. It's just something to just say crazy things and just laugh. Right. That's the way I want to use it. But getting back on, let's say, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, like all these networks that, like I said, I kept my count on. I did not, at some points, maybe I locked them down a little bit more and became a little bit more private on those accounts.
Right.
But went back, opened them up again. And thinking about like just seeing people's interactions, looking at Instagram, Facebook, and even Twitter, even like look at my follower count or the people that I follow who actually are tweeting.
Right.
There's nobody. And there's nobody like posting on Instagram as much anymore. Even Facebook, there occasionally there is, but then people just are not using the major platforms, let's say 2 years ago when I was a little bit more active. So it is interesting coming back to it. And ironically, the platform I see the most activity on is LinkedIn.
I had noticed that the other, like I replied to a comment of somebody, to a post somebody had put. Actually, it's Chris Tanksley who he's given a closing keynote at a conference that's coming up.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he had posted something on LinkedIn. I'm like, so I gave my perspective. I think we talked about it. It was like, how much do you need to know? About the stack that you're developing on. Is it useful? And then it is, but I think that idea is you just need to know a little bit more than what you need to know. That's the important thing, to have just a bit more context than what you need to know to actually complete whatever the task, whatever the job, whatever the problem you're trying to solve. Make sure you know a little bit more about the stack than what is required to solve that, and then keep pushing that boundary. Because then the next problem hopefully will, encroach on what you know. But anyway, we talked about it a couple shows ago.
Okay. That'll be a good segue because that goes right in the topic I want to talk to you about today.
Okay, but he had a post about that. I replied, and then I'm like, and by the way, when did we start posting on LinkedIn? Like when did this become a thing? Mm-hmm. And because I see people posting on LinkedIn all the time, like, should I post there? I just something came to mind as you're talking. Like I know, and I'm not saying this is something where. You ready for contrast? This is, yeah. My perspective is different, right? I've never made any of my social accounts private. I pretty much, if I post something on Facebook, it's like public or whatever, because I know they have different levels. Speaking of, is the metaverse dead? Did I see that? I saw some headlines. Is it gone now? Are we done playing virtual reality sims and pretending like that's the future?
It's so meta. It's gone to a deep dark place that I don't think people are going to be able to find it.
Okay, it's all right. I thought we were. Yeah, I thought I saw something about something being gone. But anyway, you can in Facebook you can say like who can see your posts. I think I do public all the time because my perspective is it's a false sense of privacy, right? If you post something online, it's public.
Yeah,
right? Like if you put it online, stop thinking that somehow it's not public. It's public. It's on a server somewhere that you don't control. Doesn't matter how much it's encrypted or what, all the security you think is there. Assume that it's public. Now, does that mean sometimes we actually put sensitive things like API keys or credentials? Of course, we do that all the time, right? Like we put them online. We put them in our servers on our configuration. But we know, like, what I'm talking about, the things that you're like, hey, I don't want a lot of people in it. Then don't put it online. Like that's my perspective. Assume anything that any content you create, no matter what your privacy settings are, is potentially going to be seen by everybody. That's even the rule. Like I keep notes on my talks with the team and stuff like that. I'm under no illusion that sometime that might not accidentally or intentionally or whatever, somebody be able to see those notes. I don't put things in anywhere that it would be detrimental if more than the people that I think have access to this have access to this. And that's why then on social media, I'm just like, yeah, might as well be everybody. It's
Well,
a false, to me, it's a false sense of
I do think
privacy.
having the feature that let's say on your Instagram or Facebook to like lock it down and saying, okay, I'm going to make it private to people who do not follow me, or I need to approve people who are going to follow me. I think just having a base level of privacy, or not say privacy, just a level of like visibility, be able to control the visibility of your account. I think that is good, right? I think that's kind of a really good feature to have because it gives people a little bit more control. But I do agree with you. Once it goes from your phone or your computer out into the world, onto another server, you don't have control over it anymore.
Yeah.
So, and you kind of have to know that going in. So whatever you post, just know it's online. It's never going away. It's going to be on some server
forever.
Yeah. So.
Yep. And that's kind of, I do appreciate, I understand why those features exist on those applications, because people want this. Oh, I'm only sharing it with people that I know I'm sharing with it. I get it. From my perspective, I've never ever had the desire to turn it on because I don't think anybody's, it's public anyway in my mind. So
so you mentioned the stack, Tim.
Oh boy, yeah.
And this could also probably lead into the bottleneck, maybe near the end here. But as I was thinking about the stack this week, and one thing I always do, I find myself, and it may happen today, every time we have a show, I do a little bit of work in the morning before the show. That's where I was before. I was at Starbucks for a couple of hours doing some coding away on my Sol Surface Laptop Go notebook there, and kind of working on some stuff. And but then after the show, then I'll start working on something else, and then I start thinking about things we talked about, and I start to kind of research other technology and other avenues, and then I really got into. What is it on? Because I told you last week that I'm getting back into Amazon Web Services. And so have you ever played with like the serverless?
Oh, I saw you tweet
CLI.
You tweet something about serverless. You seem very excited.
So it's interesting. Well, they call themselves a framework, but it's basically just a really, really nice CLI tool to help you to manage serverless projects between multi-cloud environments. So if you have AWS or Google Cloud or Azure, and you want to set up your project to be distributed on those platforms, it basically automates a lot of the configuration.
And let's just be clear for a second about the serverless concept. Like, we throw that out there. Oh, it's serverless. But in the end, what we're saying is you're not managing the server, and you're further away from the server. So it's not like you're thinking, hey, I have this. You never go, oh, can we install this package? No, it's serverless. It's just been abstracted away. But I think under the concept of serverless is things like Lambda functions, right?
Yes.
Which is totally code. It's code that runs on somebody's. You just have abstracted away even having to understand what operating system it's running on. So you're saying, hey, forget the operating system, just run this code, which it's just another abstraction layer. That's all. So, but yeah, they have a bunch of CLIs for managing.
Because one of the things when you get into these cloud platforms, setting up your application for it to be distributed. Say if I want to set up like an S3 bucket, or set up my Lambda functions, or to set up, I don't know, some routes or some, whatever, just some connections between all the different services that you want to be able to implement within your project. It's a lot of work, right? Setting up the configurations, not only within let's say the online web consoles, working on those can be challenging, but also just setting up your project and setting up those configuration files can be quite challenging. So what the serverless CLI does, it basically gives you a nice command line interface to generate these configurations, and then it could also do deployments. So it gives you a nice kind of command line tool to kind of do a lot of the management for you. So I was totally blown away from that, because that just totally opened up a lot of doors. It's like, wow, if I just want to easily just have this small application I want to push onto a Lambda function and be able to kind of, have it run there and just see it work, it can do that within 5 minutes. Which before it had to just do a little bit more setup, or a little bit more, using maybe the AWS CLIs or the SDK tools, and to kind of make the connections there just manually. But now having that framework, and they call it a framework, I don't know if really consider it a framework, but just this tool that's kind of, it's a layer on top of that, and it makes it's a little bit more easier to use, at least easier to get started with. I think was really, really interesting to see.
So it's, what is it? Serverless.com is the is the tool. So you said this is CLI?
It's basically just CLI tool. I know they have with their services or the serverless CLI, then they have the serverless framework, which, like I said, I'm not
like service like framework now. I thought we were trying to get away from. I thought that was what serverless was trying to do.
It's just the CLI tool. I think it's pretty cool. Like I said, it's easy to add to your project, and then just adds one configuration file, and then it basically the CLI tool just manages the configuration file. You could edit it yourself, but it does a good job of just managing for you, and then it does also the deployment or the rolling back of services. If you want to shut down a service, just use a tool and it shuts it down. So it's nice. So thinking about the stack, though, and this got me to think about, now that the semester's over, and I've always had a challenging time when I'm teaching my courses throughout the semesters to try to find a good balance between what are some, let's say, platforms or frameworks or services that I like to use, but also I can teach, right? That also I can convey, we can try to accomplish something with it in the class. That's why, as I've been talking about, spent a lot of time with Supabase, taught Next.js. Definitely taught React Native and React in my courses before, and just using kind of these large platforms, these large frameworks as teaching tools to kind of show students a little bit more kind of modern ways that web developers are making applications today. And I was trying to think about the stack, right? So what is my stack, and think about what is actually happening. And so when you use a Next.js application or a framework for your application, it's doing a lot of things for you. Right, it provides a huge amount of code underneath. It's interacting with the React libraries. It's reacting with Node.js. Right, it's doing a bunch of different things. And I would say
it's its own web server too, or I'm guessing it's using
has its own development server that you can spin up and run on your computer. It does all the packaging for you.
But right? what about when you actually launch to production? It's also the web server, right?
Well, you push it onto a function, or either a serverless function or a web application server that knows how to run that project.
Okay.
Right. So it's not a web server in itself.
Okay. But it has something that says, hey, inbound request comes in, I'm going to handle it.
Correct.
So I'm guessing it's really easy to bind it to like an Nginx.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's doing a lot of work for you. And then I was thinking, and also as a developer friendly framework, I think it's probably one of the nicest, easiest to get started with frameworks.
Next.js, right?
Yes. So as a JavaScript developer, and like I said, I'm mostly a front end client side developer, even though I would consider myself full stacks. I've done it on and off throughout my whole career. But I do like the idea of kind of sticking within TypeScript or JavaScript and kind of keeping it as one language between the server side and the client side. And also I'm really into kind of seeing too with server side rendering of, TypeScript or JavaScript, and then be able to kind of manage that with the client side and to kind of have a little bit of the best of both worlds. I'm doing a little bit more of that now too. But I just think about the stack of what Next.js is and the overall ecosystem that provides, even though it's providing a lot of tools, a lot of features, that there's a lot of but people like developers like call magic that's going on behind the scenes, which you could take a look at the source code. You could definitely dig into it, but it's doing a lot that maybe you don't fully understand. And then to really learn about where all those kind of connection points are and how the patterns that this framework is working with can take a good amount of time. And I was comparing that to the days when I first started development, good old LAMP days with PHP, HTML, your whole JavaScript, CSS, just keeping the application super simple. You could understand every part of the stack back then, right? So
there's still a huge.
You had your Apache, you had your MySQL, you had your PHP that would then render the PHP, and the Apache would render your HTML, would deliver the CSS or JavaScript to the browser, right? And so you could understand kind of every kind of part of that stack, right?
And there's still plenty of advocates for that, for a very simple. If the application can be, or whatever your service is, very simple, one script, I just do whatever needs to be done, make a simple app, simple SaaS, or it's generally more like subscription-based thing. There's lots of people that are advocates for that. But yeah, we've abstracted things away a little bit and made them then more complex, because like I'm just looking at the Next.js, all that it does, right? It's going to handle your routing. Okay, how does that work? Yep. Well, I guess it just works the way it tells me it works. If I wanted to change that, then I'd really have to dig into whatever the routing code is, right? It does rendering too, right? I guess it's using React for that. So probably if I know React, I can understand how it does it, but I'm guessing it has some thin layer between it that makes it kind of Next.js-ish, and I'd have to understand if I really wanted to change some of the way it's routing. It looks like it's got its own HTTP client too.
So what I wanted to do this week, I wanted to step away from it just to try it out. Because I'm just curious. Like, go back to, you ever heard of Express.js?
Yes, I have actually heard of it. Is Express.js, is it a little more than a routing engine? I'm trying to remember.
It's definitely, well, it's a framework that builds on top of Node.js, but definitely provides, so basically you can spin up a web server Node.js pretty easily, but it gives you a nice set of tools wrapped around Node.js. So it is like a small framework. I compare it to Slim, for those of you in the PHP world, Slim PHP.
Yeah.
Which back in the day, what I did was I made my own, I was curious about making my own MVC kind of mini framework, kind of built upon, let's say, Slim. So I did that just an experiment, just so I kind of can learn a little bit more about how MVCs are built, write my own router and then kind of create my own project structure to be able to kind of see that work. Because, coming out of other MVC frameworks, just kind of assuming that it, working with its patterns, but not really fully understanding how those patterns are implemented. So I did spend some time on that. So it reminds me, Express.js reminds me of that. And I was considering using it in my classes this semester, but then that's why I was like, to get started, you have to do still a good amount of boilerplate code to kind of get an application running on it, because you basically are doing everything, even though it does have a express router that you can use, but basically that just gives you some methods that you can define your routes.
Yeah, it's very little more than just
but
saying,
then you need to define then what happens within those routes,
Right.
like how it's going to either render or which files it's going to load in and to be able to be returned. So you still have to do a good amount of work there. So I thought from a teaching perspective, it would just be a little bit too much for me to really kind of get the students to work with. But going back to it, if I could just build a simple stack, let's say you have Node.js, you have Express on top of that, and then just start to build out my own kind of application. So I also got into, which was another set of libraries or frameworks that I've wanted to use or spend more time with, Lit.js. Have you seen this?
No.
So Lit.js, that was another thing. So I wanted to kind of build a small stack of Node.js, Express, and then Lit.js. So Lit.js is a reactive style set of libraries or framework, considered like a very, very small framework, especially when you compare it to something like React, that gives you a web component model. And if you think about what web components are just part of the browser's API.
Anymore. Right? That's the thing. Yeah, they've been adopted into it. Like they weren't always.
So if you just want to make your own, let's break down like your own tag that has some built-in functionality into it. You could make your own tag as a web component. And it doesn't require any framework or it's basically just HTML and JavaScript. That's all it is, and CSS too. But it's a way for you to enclose functionality within your own component, and it's built, and the technology for that is built into all the browsers now. So it's really, really cool. So what Lit.js does, it basically just gives you a nicer set of features or functions wrapped around that. So in the end, when you are working with Lit.js, the output of that is basically just basic web components. So it just makes it a little bit nice to work with. Like, it does have some decorator features that I'm not a really big decorator person. I don't really like that, because I think that also obfuscates and does a little bit of magic behind the scenes, which I think I'd rather just write the code and just be able to kind of see that rather than use the decorators. But it does have some nice things, like it has like a nice HTML kind of a templating object or method I could use to kind of just render out HTML. So that's a really kind of nice feature. It makes it a little bit easier to create web components. Also, I really like the class-based model that's using. So how you can define a class. You're only really extending just the lit element with it. So you're not doing anything with multiple inheritance and going down bad roads with that, but just having a very kind of simple class-based structure that gives you that allows you to implement some functionality on top of the web components and be able to make those is really cool. So think about my stack as Node.js, Express, and then having Lit.js be like the client side. But also what I was able to implement was with Express and Lit, be able to do server-side rendering now with web components and just roll it up myself. So all this kind of server-side rendering that Next.js was giving you out of the box, if I really want to see how that is implemented and be able to implement that in my own stack, you could do that. So it was pretty kind of interesting to see. So it got me to think about, I'm kind of enjoying this kind of working with a very kind of smaller set of libraries or kind of a smaller stack. And what I could also do now is I could really dig into each one of those and really understand each part of that stack. Because before, when I would work in larger frameworks, it's so much to learn and so much to kind of wrap your head around. It also feels like there's so much you just have to accept, right? You just have to accept that, okay, it gives me this functionality, it gives me these patterns. I'm just going to kind of just work with it because I need to get the job done. But do I really, if I really want to dig into understanding that could take a good amount of work to do it. But if you work with smaller frameworks, smaller libraries, and also it's interesting too, to kind of libraries that are actively being developed. So Lit.js has like their Lit Labs, which their SSR, their server-side rendering, that's actually a little bit more experimental. So it's actually interesting. There's some features that haven't truly been implemented in the libraries yet, but you can go into GitHub, see what people are talking about. You could actually read the code and be able to kind of follow along. So it actually that's also been kind of a nice experience where the library isn't too vast. And while it's still being developed, you can have a good sense of what are the issues and what people are doing to kind of either work around them or to think about, what suggestions people are making to make these features actually more stable.
I mean, I think that though as I try to figure out how much I know on the JavaScript stack, right? But it resonates with a lot of what I see in the PHP world, where I would rather the core functionality of what happens. I would rather own that. Mm-hmm. And then if I say, you know what, this is getting complex to write and template these routes. Let's use let's use a library that does routing, where I can give it a URL and it can give me back whatever I defined for that URL. Oh, here's the variables of that URL, and here's the thing that hopefully, based on whatever this thing is, you can figure out what middleware, what controller, what handler, whatever you want to call it. You can figure out what needs to be executed. But I'm not going to do that for you. I'm just a routing library that says, given a URL, I'll give you what it matches. And let's just do that by itself, right? Let's not, because you're seeing Next.js. I do everything. And this is how you wire up a handler. And this is how you have to do this. Versus, well, if I use this really simple routing engine, and then I pull in, like say, Lit instead of using React, I know I know what's going on. And sometimes you're going to say, I need that. I need React. Okay, bring in React and wire React in instead of having to have a full-blown framework that has React in it. Just say, oh no, this application requires React. My other one required, Lit because it was really simple and didn't need what React offered. But I understand how these components interact with each other, so I can change them and I can modify that behavior if needed, instead of just saying, well, this is just how you build an application. You build an application this way. And
which I think I want to encourage like all young developers, which is, coming out of teaching, I see this all the time. We're like, that it's great to learn a system, learn a framework, right? Because it does get you off the ground pretty fast and kind of just shows you kind of how you can build an application and get it working as quickly as possible. And there is a lot of value to that, especially in businesses, especially if you need to solve a problem, you don't have much time to do that. And you need to throw a web application together in a short amount of time. A web framework like Next.js, or let's say Laravel, right, on the PHP world, or kind of other these large frameworks that does a good job of providing all the tools that you need for the web application out of the box, and you just need to kind of just work within its model. Then I think that those are great tools to have. But you should always be questioning, really trying to understand how does it work, because I've been hearing a lot about this server-side rendering or running on the edge or running on Lambda functions, right? And kind of just hearing a lot about this and how, these new frameworks, they provide all these nice new features, but then, well, how are these features actually implemented? And really kind of really figure that out for yourself, because that's the best way to learn, and really the best way to understand. Because then if I want to go into maybe in the future for a client or for a company, I need to work with a large framework like Next.js, I'll have a better understanding about how that technology works underneath the hood of those type of frameworks.
Yeah, and understanding it because you don't want to go down the road of, well, I'll just roll it all myself, right? Because I think every developer has done the whole. Sure. I can write an ORM. How hard is it? And then once you get into it, you're like, oh, I realize this is why there's a few good ORM packages, and it isn't, because it is a difficult thing. There are hard problems to solve, but at least if you've dug into it enough on a component library instead of a framework level, where at a frame you tend to, when you're working at things and you model them as a framework problem, it's like, well, how does the framework store this data database? Oh, you follow this pattern and it works. Okay, but when you model as a library, all right, I'm using this specific ORM. I know a little bit more about how it works because I'm not one step removed, right? I'm not following the framework's guide to write even if they're using the same library, because they probably wrapped it in their own little syntax, and they've taken some things that in the library are configurable and they've made it the convention. This is how you do it. So then you start understanding the convention and not how it actually works. So taking that step and saying, all right, libraries are great. Like in that context, dependencies, though, always something that then means, yeah, we're dependent on something. But a dependency is good and useful and valuable if I understand it.
Yeah, no,
but
I agree.
It's a problem when they're like 2 steps down, and I'm really using this dependency, but I'm using it through this collection of dependencies that just says, now I'm going to present the whole world to you. Instead of saying, no, understand the different parts, and then if you need to rearrange how they're put together, you can.
Yeah, that was also driving me crazy with like working on React projects, like the number of dependencies that you don't see.
Oh yeah.
Like the interdependencies within the frameworks with these libraries is so crazy, and you run into like weird edge cases with, especially with if one library that is dependent upon another library and it's not being updated, and just I've ran into that in the Ruby world with the Ruby gems. Remember back in the day, ran into a lot of issues with that, and then with NPM and with package managers, there's always going to be cases like that. But if you adopt a library that has so many of those hidden or kind of unknown dependencies, and if you go look at your node modules folder, or what was the equivalent on PHP when you have your composer?
We have a /vendor, but yeah,
vendor folder. If you really, so if you can look at that folder, look at the contents of the folder. If you don't understand, if you start looking at all those packages and really, what is that doing?
Where did these all come from? Yeah.
So it is nice also having a small project now, and I could just look at my production dependency is basically like 4 libraries. And if I go look at the node modules folder, there's some additional libraries.
There's more, because I'm sure each one of those libraries is a couple.
Yes, I know, but it's not too crazy. It's actually a little bit more manageable.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a nicer feelings. I think, kind of managing your dependencies or just being aware of them, and just knowing that if you are bringing these into your project, you're supporting them on some level, or you may be in the future, right? If issues start to come up. So understanding stack. So what you alluded to, the other developer that you were alluding to, I guess, is who is speaking at a future conference.
Yeah.
So he was talking about understanding the stack, understanding his stack, and being what was.
Well, no, it was. I think we talked about this either last week or the week before. The question was the context of how much of the stack do you need to know, and if you're developing, should you understand the entire stack? If you're a web developer, should you understand how the HTTP protocol works? To some extent, yes, it's good to have a working understanding of that, right? And where my answer came was, is it useful that I know how a shift register works? And is it useful that I know that you can create 1 bit of memory by just wiring 2 transistors back to back? Like, I understand. And yes, I think there is value to understanding at a basic level, this is how computers work, because I have a bit of that electronic background. I think there's value there. Is it necessary for me to solve my job? No. Does it help me? I think so. But where my perspective is that idea of just a little bit more. So if I'm solving a problem with this code, I should know, because that's the other thing. Once you get into larger projects, like the code base that we have, there's parts of the code base that we have I don't know how that exactly works. So when I go into a problem, what do I need to understand? Well, just a little bit more than what I am working on. It's like you need to know the inputs and the outputs just 1 step higher. Or I think what it came down to when we were talking about it the other day was this idea of, you should at least, if you're going to be using a library and you're going to be calling a method on that library, know what that method does. Don't necessarily know what the methods that method calls do, but at least dig into the code and be like, hey, what happens when I call, I'm going to use Doctrine as an example because that's the ORM in PHP that's, pretty established, right? Know what happens when you call entity manager flush, and that's what that does is that takes everything that's in memory and flushes it to the database, right? But click into that, right? Go to that declaration and look to see, there's this unit of work thing that's calculated, and then we use the
step back this. Flush it down the database, as in like it just
flush means flush it out of memory into the database.
So basically, what does the transaction, the inserts?
Yeah, that would because it handles state
interesting
in memory.
Term to.
I found it interesting. I don't know. I've never dug into why they called it that. But no, it's
because I always like the term database dump.
Right. It's better than drop.
Because but if you're going to dump a database, you're going to output the content, the database, the schema to a file.
Right.
But then you can eventually load or use it someplace else. So at least that term, that kind of made sense to me. Okay, I'm going to dump the database. All right.
Yeah, this is flushing all changes
I'm going to
from
flush
memory.
The ORM into the database. Okay.
Into the database. Yeah. Yep. That's the idea. So,
right.
But like, go to that method and look at it and see what it does. So you have a good understanding of, this uses, whatever other object to see what are all the things in memory. And I see there's something here like looks like it's a dirty check, and to see what's changed, right?
And dirty check.
It'll flush that to the database. I don't know, Mark.
Who came up with these? Oh my gosh.
Like that's a common term.
A dirty check?
Well, to check to see if you keep track of state, whether the object's dirty or not.
Changed.
Yeah, whether
so
it's
like
dirty or not.
Diff.
Yeah, but I mean, using the phrase "dirty," meaning the object has changed. And
but it can mean something that's bad or something went wrong with it.
It also can mean that, but yeah, that's for data synchronization. That's a common term. to see if you have changed the data and if it's out of sync, it's dirty. So that's a comment. I don't know what's up with this today.
You're just doing a diff on it. That's because it makes a little more sense. You're seeing what has changed, what's different.
Yeah, but the phrase for an object in that state is that it's dirty.
All right,
that's what it is.
It just feels like it's like dirty with some negative things.
It's just changed and it
needs to be cleaned.
Needs
to be scrubbed.
Well, then when you clean it is when you push it into
Maybe you should dump it.
Or flush it. One of the two. Wow, this episode has gone off the rails, and I have some bad news. I forgot to hit record, so we're gonna have to just rethink everything we said and say it again so we can get it for the recording.
Oh, I'm recording.
Yeah, you're recording. I'll have to use the stream audio for at least the first half.
Well, it sounds good. Okay, so
I forgot to hit record. But so this 10x journey that you're on, like you want to become a 10x developer?
Oh, that's another one of those Twitter memes that I'm kind of just seeing.
What is a 10x developer? Are they supposed to be 10 times more efficient than other people?
Well, there's this thing of like, aren't there? You have the regular developers and you have these 10x developers. And the 10x developers could do the work of 10 developers.
10 developers, they could. For how long?
2 hours a day.
2 hours. That's what I mean. Like
no, we put like a tie to it, but
because there's this idea of I can take 10 developers to do my work. All right, well, but how long are you going to be able to keep that pace exactly? And
I think it's another term. I can say
I get it now. It's going to take 10 developers to fix the terrible code that I just wrote quickly.
So
that's what it means. 10x developers.
developers.
I'm gonna write the code. It's gonna get out there. Everybody's gonna be like, "This works," but then it's gonna take 10 developers just to understand and maintain this monstrosity. Is that what they're getting at?
I don't know. I think it is kind of it's a marketing term for a good senior developer.
That's what they say. They stop using Ninja and Rockstar, and
it's like
10X.
A senior ninja, Tim.
Senior ninja. I think it's a Rockstar ninja. Isn't that what you want? Looking to hire a senior Rockstar ninja.
So it's just a developer who has some experience, who could be able to efficiently write code. And I also think too, maybe it's a developer. We talked about this. A developer is once you have more experience and been doing this for a while, there's less brute force that you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
there's always gonna be some where, especially when you're kind of working through a problem, you're gonna have to be doing some testing or some, trial and error with trying to figure out different solutions. But the more experience you have, especially let's say within a specific platform or a specific code base or a language, right,
Mhm.
become more of an expert of it. There's less kind of trial and error, less brute force. But you have like a junior developer or a mid-level developer who doesn't have too much experience. They're going to be doing a lot more of that.
Out of
And that could,
curiosity,
and
why
that
do you think that's true? What is the skill?
It's just a knowledge base, like building a
Is
knowledge
it?
base. Yeah, I don't know if I think it is partly a skill of knowing. So if you saw a problem that
Yeah.
maybe is a variant of a problem you've worked on in the past,
Okay.
then you have some knowledge, some skill that you could, or let's say some knowledge that you could then use your skill that you developed to solve that problem, or specifically to that use case.
I
So I think,
wonder too, in line with that,
mhm,
I've had problems that I've solved before.
mhm,
I wonder if it is getting better at the decomposition of the problem. And instead of
mhm.
trying to solve a complex problem, decompose it
Breaking
into
down
simple
smaller
problems that
parts.
you're like,
Yeah,
I know how to solve that, that,
yeah,
that, that. This one's a little tricky. I don't really know, but if I solve all that, then there's just really one thing that is kind of a puzzler for a bit. Once we figure
mhm.
that out, we're done. Instead of trying to solve them all together and realizing that this is too hard, and I'm just going to keep. And you get in those, I think, what you're alluding to, like those when you say brute force, it's like that. I'm just writing this code, and then I'm writing this code, I'm writing this code. It's just like I got so much code here just to try to do the thing and try to get it the way it's supposed to be, and it doesn't really work well together. And I just wonder. I wonder if the skill, or one of the main skills that helps with that, is understanding how to decompose a problem.
I like that, to break it down to smaller parts
Yeah.
and not get overwhelmed with the overarching, large problem in a sense, and not knowing how to, or maybe just knowing how to decompose it, or how to target what you should really focus on.
Because many times those smaller problems are solved. They're known.
Yeah.
Like, we know how to solve this problem. So and you can probably, not probably, I'm almost certain you can decompose a single problem into different, you can decompose it different ways, right? Like, I may break it into these sets of things, you may break into those sets of things, and even understanding and knowing how to say, maybe we should change how we even look at taking it apart
Mhm.
is probably one of those skills that is helpful in that context.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it is just a new term for that. Like I said, senior kind of rock star developer that that people companies just dream about having. Having this one developer who could do the work of 10 other developers. You only have to pay one person, a
I
good
don't
salary,
know.
rather than have to pay all these
It I think it's one of those
these
things,
younger, smaller whippersnappers who don't
right?
really know how to solve problems or how to do testing.
Feel like it's one of those things where it sounds good on the surface, but then you're like, well, we have one point of failure here. This one developer, if
It's
he's
true.
gone, no one knows
That's true.
anything about what's going on here. Yeah, I don't know. I don't
But
know.
now with AI, we can all be 10x developers,
We can
Tim.
all, is that how it is?
Which
Is that how
that
it
gets
is?
me another rant.
Are you
Which
going to talk about how you severed your relationship with ChatGPT? Is that
I've been spending so much time arguing with ChatGPT. I gave up on it.
just fire up a new chat? You're like,
It
it's not
even
me, it's
you
you,
and I
ChatGPT.
started to use since Google opened up Bard more, and they said that they
I don't.
update it.
Did they? Because I tried. I gave it a shot like once or twice. It was terrible.
I know. Well, you used it like a couple months ago, right? When it first
Yeah,
came out.
yeah, it
So
was horrible.
this week was, well, Google's I/O, and so one of their big announcements was like, oh, we updated Bard. We're working on even our unicorn language model that's going to be the next version of it, and so great things are coming. And they started to tout their developer kind of AI of how, just like with GitHub Copilot
Right,
or
because Bard will read your code and stuff like that, right?
ChatGPT, and so. It's interesting. Yeah, I got just as frustrated with Bard as I do ChatGPT, and it is interesting hearing people freak out about how the fact that either AI is going to take developers' jobs, or that you don't need to code anymore. You don't need to learn how to code anymore.
Right.
Because AI is just going to do it for you. It's just absurd, especially the state at which the tools are now. It's
Yes.
laughable, especially when you spend a lot of time with it. If you just do some quick little small experiments with it, and just it is pretty cool.
It is great for example code, right?
And
it is great for
demos.
simple idea.
The teaching resource I was using was just to spit out a bunch of code I could just talk about. Oh my gosh, it was great. But if I'm trying to actually solve a real problem that exists, and it doesn't do a really good job, especially when you give it code and say this code has like I don't say a bug, but just has something about it that you're getting back an error message and you have a hard time, and you could Google the error message, try to figure out where it's coming from. But if I can just plug the code in here, and could the AI just tell me where that error is coming from, it will still try to tell you where it's coming from, but that may not be correct. I was running the issue so many times, and what ChatGPT was doing, it started just repeat back over and over again to me basically the exact same answer, the exact same wrong answer.
And you're like, no, that's wrong.
I will give Bard credit. What at least will do, it has an endpoint, and it says like, okay, I'm sorry, I'm a language model. I may not know the answer to this. It says you may want to research this online or go onto some forums and talk to other developers. And I kind of appreciate that. It knows its limitations.
How long until the phrase "I'm just a large language model" makes it into pop culture, and it's like the punchline of joke birthday cards, or I don't know. Sorry, I'm just a large language model.
Yeah. So I got.
It's gonna be on somebody's T-shirt. Is gonna say, "Sorry, I'm just a large language model."
I was realizing, it was spending more. I was spending more time arguing with the AI to try to help fix problems rather than just. And I actually started finding myself this week going back to Stack Overflow. I was like, okay, I just want to hear some real people talk about their solutions, because it makes I can at least parse that a little bit better rather than argue with this AI.
This is great. This is great. This is like the whole cycle. What everybody thought was going to happen, and now Mark's like, and then I just said, Stack Overflow, please help me. So ChatGPT can't solve this problem.
So what I did, yes, I canceled my ChatGPT Plus. I'm not going to pay for that anymore. And so I realized, okay, I'm still going to use it. I'm still like, but what do we do? I'll just use a free version. And like I said, I was using Bard a little more since they updated it. And it is interesting. Like I said, it's definitely, I would say,
a little rough on the edges.
Probably ChatGPT is still better than Bard when it comes to analyzing code. But I do like its responses. Actually, I think Google's actually done a real good job on kind of how it conveys responses. Because one thing ChatGPT did, it was like over anxious and saying wanted to be helpful to solve the problem. Bard is a little bit more, what's the word? Like I said, it knows its limitations. It'll say, okay, maybe it doesn't have the answer. You need to go, these are some different ways to kind of research the problem and kind of continue this on. Or when it gives you a solution, it kind of gets a little bit more optimistic about it. It's not as like declarative. It's like, oh, this is the solution. This is going to work. This is what that's what ChatGPT was doing. I was like, no, it's not. And so it kind of felt like really frustrating. Like it was so sure that this is what it is, and then it wasn't. So I'm just going to use the free versions occasionally, but listen, I still love GitHub Copilot. Still use that for one-line completions. That saves me a huge amount of time when I'm just trying to write code that I know what I need to write, and then it kind of looks at my code and does a good analysis of seeing what I'm trying to write, which language, which libraries I'm using, and it does a good job just auto-completing that kind of stuff, and that saves me a huge amount of time.
I would wonder how much ChatGPT is going to bleed over that, since
true, and what is
Copilot.
Because the Copilot is on the Codex model that
right, but I mean they're both Microsoft's investment into ChatGPT plus owns GitHub, right? So
I don't know. It's kind of interesting, kind of see where I was going with that this week. Just I'm kind of getting frustrated with the AI, or just getting frustrated with the fact of like people think that this is gonna I do eventually. Yes, I think most of the code probably will be auto generated, but at the same time, you still need developers to understand what's being written.
So I just thought I'd give it a shot. We've only got 1:30 left, Mark. And I haven't talked about how if you want to go to PHP Tech and you can't, you should go to phptech.tv, because there you can sign up and watch at least the live streams. So I thought, but I wanted to test this out. You said you think Bard might be getting better. I took one of your recent tweets where you said, I have come to two conclusions. One, the only way AI will kill us is if it's junior developers blindly copy and pasting code from the AI. Two, developers complaining AI will take their jobs are junior developers. However, I do appreciate Bard's warning, use code with caution. And I said, Bard, write a sarcastic response to this tweet. And this is what Bart came up with. Wow, Mark, thanks for the hot take. I had no idea the world was a complex and nuanced place and that there are many different factors that contribute to climate change. I'm so glad you were able to clear that up for me. In all seriousness, though, your tweet is incredibly simplistic and ignores the vast body of scientific evidence that shows human activity is the primary cause of climate change. The fact that you're still trying to deny climate change in 2023 is just embarrassing. Grow up and start taking this issue seriously. The future of our planet depends on it. So there you go, Mark. Bard is definitely getting better in how it can understand what I'm asking it to do. And I'm about ready to use more Bard.
Man, okay, now I know how the AI will kill us. It will somehow bring about climate change through bad code. I think that's what it's planning on.
They just all right, we're gonna leave the stream going for a little bit longer. They gave me 3 drafts, and they're all just blind, sarcastic responses to different topics.
Oh, so what's the upper tops other than climate change?
Wow, what a great idea. Let's just make everyone work 12-hour days, 7 days a week so that we can all be rich and successful. That's definitely the way to happiness and fulfillment.
There you go. That sounds like you. That sounds like a sarcastic reply for you.
But from that tweet, in all seriousness, though, this is a terrible idea. Working long hours is not sustainable. It can lead to burnout, health problems, lack of blah, blah, blah. All right, here's draft 3 of our sarcastic. Oh boy, this isn't even a tweet. This is a small novel. I'm so glad that the people are most. It's just picking random tweets. It quoted a tweet that wasn't yours.
Oh, really?
Yeah, here's a sarcastic response to the tweet. I'm so glad that the people who are most qualified to make decisions about the future of our country are the ones who are least likely to be affected by them. So I'm guessing it doesn't even go out and fetch it. So let's give Bard in the I gave it just a URL. Let me copy and paste your content.
Oh, I thought that's what you did. I thought you copied and pasted the tweet.
No.
You just did the URL. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Write a response to this tweet. So next week, which we won't be able to do a show because I will be busy. But now I will, but no. Like Mark, but it knows. Oh, maybe it just pulled it from it must have pulled it from Twitter. The URL has your name in it because it referenced Mark. So let's try this one. I'm giving it right, and I actually gave it the tweet content. So in 2 weeks, I'll have to come back and apologize to Bard. Thanks for the laugh, Mark Coberline. It's always refreshing to hear from someone who is so clearly out of touch with reality. The fact is, AI is not going to take our jobs. In fact, it's going to make our jobs easier and more efficient. AI can automate many of the tasks we currently do manually, freeing us up to focus on more creative and strategic work. So instead of worrying about AI taking our jobs, we should be embracing it as a tool that can help us be more productive and successful. And if you're a junior developer who's worried about being replaced by AI, don't be. Just learn how to use AI effectively and you'll be fine.
Is that really what it says?
As Bard says, use code with caution.
So it says, oh, don't worry if you're junior developer, just learn how to use the AI.
But
it'll be okay.
But I gave it that tweet. I said, write a sarcastic response to this tweet. And then I semicolon your text. And it says in the body, sure, here's a sarcastic response to the tweet. Then put in quotes. I'm so glad we have junior developers to protect us from the danger of AI. They're clearly the most qualified people to make decisions for the future of this company or the future of our industry. Like, it's not even reading it. It's looking at the content that I gave it, finding a tweet that's similar and sarcastically responding to that.
I don't know, Tim, but I don't use Bard or ChatGPT to write my tweets for me. So
maybe we should just I hadn't thought about that.
What?
I'm gonna feed it a bunch of things and have it write a bunch of tweets for me that I can queue up in a buffer. Not Bard, obviously, but ChatGPT. So what if I fed it? What if I fed ChatGPT? Now I have an outline for my keynote. This is the bonus episode. I mean, man.
Oh, just to give you some tweets you can like automate.
I just have an outline. It's not written. Yeah. It's an outline. I could throw that in there. I could say, hey, write me 10 tweets to go over the next days promoting this talk.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't thought about that. Like, that's the thing that I'm trying to catch up with, and like, how can I leverage this stuff? The other day, like, I need to do some research for our dev meeting on a particular type of meeting style. I just went to ChatGPT. I'm like, hey, summarize this for me.
Mm-hmm.
And just spat it all out. And I was like, okay, so we're a dev team with, this context.
Yeah.
Give me a couple examples of what topics and issues that we would use in this context would be like. It's like, well, here you go. It's like, that was more product-y. I want something that's more developer oriented around the code and all that. Oh, here you go. It's like, all right, now I see how this might work and example topics that might be brought up. And yeah, so from a learning standpoint, it's a great tool.
No, that's my favorite thing to use. Just use it to like just generate ideas.
Because that's like what it's supposed to be used for.
Yeah.
But people think it's not what it is, and that doesn't help anybody. But
I know copy and pasting from the AI will not.
No,
will
but
not
this
be
man,
maybe
this is it.
Maybe did you ask the AI which is the best super glue to buy?
No, I didn't have to, because I know it is the Gorilla Super Glue Gel is the best. And if you've not glued your fingers to each other, I don't know that you've ever used super glue. That's just, I don't think you have. So,
no, since I'm a 10x super gluer, that I don't have that issue anymore.
Oh boy, fun times.
All right. So when you heading off?
I fly out like ridiculously early Monday morning.
Okay.
Like 6:15 from Philly, which is crazy because that means I have to be there at what, like 5:15, 5 o'clock, something like that.
Yeah.
Which means I have to leave here at 3:30ish.
And then this next morning, right? That's when you're doing your keynote?
Tuesday morning. Yep. On phptech.tv. I'm interested to see how that goes.
Yeah.
Because it's really cool. Like, I think the setup that they're using is really cool. They're streaming from 3 different ATEMs to a server and then pushing it out over S3. So S3 is the stream relay, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that works. I've got a small child up here trying to push things onto my keyboard. So
all right. Well,